Okay, guys, this is my review for UFC 143. It was a pretty good card. Really enjoyed it. Obviously, the main event was really the main event. What everybody was really looking forward to see. So let's first start off with Ed Herman versus Clifford Starks. This ended like I thought it was going to end. Basically, the experience of Herman just pretty much bulldozered over Starks. He ended up catching him with like a judo sweep in the second round, into a mount, into Starks trying to get out of the mount, and he gave him his back, and then Herman pretty much put a rear naked choke on him and choked him out in round 2 of 143. So then the next match would be Barra versus Jorgensen. I thought this was going to be I thought Barr was going to pretty much go in there and demolish Jorgensen by using, his striking ability, leg kicks and whatnot, and then take it to the ground and submit the guy pretty easily. But that didn't happen. What ends up happening is he did get caught with a bunch of strikes, leg kicks, get a bunch of combinations thrown on him, and I'm talking about Jorgensen. He ended up catching a lot of that. Jorgensen, on the other hand, just throwed a lot of one shots, one strikes, no combinations. He would just throw a jab out there, or just throw a straight out there. He wouldn't finish up with a combination, which he probably would have done a lot better. He ended up getting just picked apart in the leg with leg kicks and all types of kicks from Barrow. And then on top of that, Barrow was throwing 1-2s, 1-2-3s, just throwing all types of combinations. And but Jorgensen did take it. He didn't get pushed over like I thought he was going to get done to him. And he ends up, lasting the whole 3 rounds with the guy who's really good, which says a lot about him. So, but Barr still ends up beating him anyway by unanimous decision. So then we have Josh Koscheck versus Mike Pierce. And this is the same thing where you have a guy like Josh Koscheck who's fought, GSP and all these other guys, top tier guys. And then you have Mike Pierce who's calling out Josh Koscheck, and Koscheck got a little upset with that by saying that he shouldn't, call me out. He's not even on my level type of stuff. And what ends up happening is Mike Pierce really is at Koscheck's level. It was a really even fight between these two. And the only thing that really saved Koscheck in this fight was his base, which is wrestling. He ended up getting 2 takedowns versus 1 takedown, which saved him the rounds, saved him the end of the rounds and allowed him to win those rounds. Mike Pierce ended up catching Koscheck in a lot of exchanges where Koscheck had to kind of retreat because of Mike Pierce having more power. Koscheck still had the speed, but Pierce had the power, and it stunned Koscheck quite a few times, and he had to circle out and whatnot. But what really saved the Koscheck in this, I have to repeat it again, is his wrestling. His wrestling really saved him. But it's not a bad thing to say Pierce really shouldn't hold his head down, because he really stood in there, even though I know he wanted to win. But Koscheck ends up beating Mike Pierce by split decision. So then we have a heavyweight bout, which was between Roy Nelson and Verdun. Now, obviously, everyone knows Verdun for beating Fedor in Strikeforce with the triangle choke. And I think Verdun, he's been in the UFC before. I think it's been since 2008 or something like that. So this is his return, because all of the guys in Strikeforce, the heavyweight division, is getting moved over to the UFC. Roy Nelson, obviously, won turf. I don't know what number, but he won. And he's had some issues with his cardio and being out of shape and things of that nature. So he went against a guy that's, supposed to be on the lower tier level. And he ends up getting demolished. due to knees and strikes. Roy Nelson was really looking for that one-hitter quitter, but it really wasn't working for him. He ends up getting caught in a clinch a lot and just getting kneed in the face and the side and the body, and just gets kneed over and over and over with, some strikes in there, some straights and some hooks. And Verdum really just uses his speed and his cardio and the clinch especially to really just demolish Roy Nelson. And even though he doesn't finish him, because Roy Nelson is extremely tough to finish, his chin is just unbelievable, because a lot of those knees that if anybody else would have took them, they would have been out unconscious on the ground. But don't get me wrong, Roy Nelson's face does show that he got hit with a bunch of knees. But he ends up, Verdum ends up winning. Okay, guys, as you see, I'm wearing a different shirt. I'm editing this scene and over into the full review video. My stupid camera died in the middle of me doing the review on the actual day of the fight. So anyway, this is kind of the aftermath of my Patriots losing, which I'm a little disappointed about that. But let's first start with the end of this video, which is the main event, Nick Diaz versus Condit. The biggest factor in this is, everyone from the aftermath of this fight is saying that, Nick Diaz got screwed, he should have won that fight. And if you watch the fight, the biggest thing was pretty much Nick Diaz pushing Condit back, walking him down, being more aggressive in the fight. But that can be taken two different ways. We all know that the Jackson camp, had a plan, and they knew that he was going to be aggressive and to push Condit, against the cage. But what you have to do is you have to push the person against the cage and then land blows, which Nick Diaz did in the first round, probably second round. The third, fourth, and fifth, he necessarily didn't do. You saw Condit really using his angles and circling out, avoiding being pushed up against the cage, and effectively counter-striking him by throwing leg kicks and other strikes. If you look at the, I think it's the fight matrix. I don't know the exact numbers, but if you look at it, you will see that Condit really outstruck Nick Diaz with power shots, obviously kicks, strikes in general, and I think effective strikes or power strikes. He effectively beat him as far as the number output, as far as throwing those types of strikes. Obviously, at the very end, the fifth round, Condit got taken on the ground, back mounted, got up, threw some shots, but necessarily in a lot of situations, guys will say, well, he won that fifth round because he got taken on the ground, but he pretty much got dominated all the way up until that point. Condit was really controlling the match. It's kind of like you're controlling the cage, but you're not controlling the fight. And Nick Diaz controlled the cage, but he did not control the fight in itself. So that's what I really have to say about that fight. It was a good fight, an interesting fight, a really technical fight. It wasn't head to head like I thought it was going to be, and I'm glad Condit didn't do that. Now, obviously, UFC and a bunch of other guys would like to see the Nick Diaz fight, including GSP himself, would rather fight GSP than Condit because, it's a good guy versus bad guy, the way that they don't like each other. It just has a lot of personal stuff in it also. Condit is really a nice guy also, just as well as GSP, So it's really nothing against these guys. Really don't hate each other like Nick Diaz and GSP. But nevertheless, it's still going to be a good fight. Nick Diaz said that he can't take this, take this shit anymore. He's going to pretty much leave the UFC or leave MMA altogether because he can't take this, all the way that they scored the fight because he was pressing up against him and blah, blah, blah. He's going to quit MMA. Do I think he's going to quit MMA? I doubt it. I think he still has a couple of more fights in his contract. Do I think he may quit then? He might, it's just a different breed when you fight guys from the UFC versus Strikeforce. And yes, he did beat up BJ Penn. BJ Penn fought more of his fight. People are starting to understand when you go against Nick Diaz that you don't really want to fight his fight. You don't want to go in there and try to go heads up with him and try to outstrike him when his cardio is just insane. So guys are not going to do that. Guys aren't going to go in there and sit up there and strike with you all day long and let's have a boxing match. And you will end up being on the bad end of that scenario, and he'll get his hand raised. So you're going to go against guys who are going to do what Condit did, or are you going to go against guys who are just going to just wrestle you to death and get you on the ground and pound you out there? So Nick Diaz has to understand, and that's what his issue that he had previously when he was in the UFC was he was just really getting pounded out by wrestlers. Wrestlers were really controlling the match, and then he would get, in his post-fight interviews, he would say, these guys just want to hump me all day. They just want to lay on top of me and da-da-da-da. Well, it's MMA. You should expect those type of things. That's what you train for. And that's what Nick Diaz has to get over, is that guys aren't going to fight his fight all the time. And if he wants to do that, if he wants guys that he can just beat up upon and not become the best in the world, he's going to have to go back to Strikeforce. Or go to boxing, but then again, that's another realm also. So anyway, guys, that's my review for UFC 143. If you like the video, please comment, subscribe, and rate as usual. And I'll see you guys later. Peace.